Perfection is not attainable, but if we chase perfection, we can obtain excellence. Vince Lombardi said that, and I've always liked that quote, and it is a very good metaphor for the Sig MCX lineup. The MCX lineup has been around for quite a while now, and the new Sig Spear Lt can be kind of looked at as the third generation or incarnation of that lineup. I personally own an MCX Gen 1 and a Rattler. I never got a Virtus or the widely accepted Gen 2 version of the MCX because I felt that some of those features and improvements of the Gen 2 were present in the Rattler. The MCX at any generation has some very impressive features. Easily swappable barrels, calibers, handguard stocks, no buffer tube allowing the stock to fold, piston-driven operating systems, among other innovative features that make any MCX a very appealing firearm. However, previous generations have been somewhat plagued with small problems that kept them from living up to the full potential that I for one knew the system was capable of. Sig, constantly pursuing perfection, has released the current generation of the MCX, the Spear Lt. Has Sig finally perfected the MCX lineup, or is this just another stepping stone on the path? Guys, a huge thank you goes out for today's sponsor, American Hartford Gold. I don't know if you've tuned into the news lately, but it's basically a huge dumpster fire out there. Inflation is rampant, foreign countries are turning away from the US dollar for trade. Every day that goes by, the money in your bank account is worth less than the day before. If you're like me, you've worked hard for everything you have and want to protect your hard-earned money. You can do that by purchasing firearms and purchasing gold and silver from American Hartford Gold. American Hartford Gold has built its reputation by helping individuals and families protect their wealth with precious metals. Call 866-545-6763 or text Alabama to 65532. There is also a link in the description if you'd like to get more information. Obviously, the new Spear Lt is influenced heavily by the full-size Spear, or XM7, the winner of the Army's Next Generation Squad Weapons trials. We have had several videos on that rifle already, thanks to our friends at Illumin Arms, and if you haven't seen those, I highly recommend you check them out. Having had the opportunity to shoot the full-size Spear and now the LT version gives us a somewhat unique perspective not shared by many others. The first thing you greatly notice when you pick up the Spear Lt is the significant weight loss from the previous generation of the MCX. My Gen 1 MCX was pretty lightweight, but it had a pencil profile barrel and some other things that needed beefing up. The Virtus or Gen 2 weighed in at 7.9 pounds, and the Spear Lt weighs in at 7.5 pounds, which for a piston-driven gun is pretty light. It's kind of a happy medium where the weight is reduced, but it is still rugged, reliable, and we'll discuss accuracy in a minute, but I'm very happy with where the weight is at on the Spear Lt. That to me is one of the things that always held back the MCX. With all these great features, it was a little on the heavy side. It was never a deal breaker for me, but it did detract from the package. I would consider that resolved in the Spear Lt because we are also comparing 16-inch guns. Shorter barrel guns would be even lighter. The handguards have always been somewhat of a controversial aspect for the MCX. The original design was a groundbreaking idea. Have the handguard removable by just taking out the front takedown pin, which is amazingly cool. However, the handguards also were always a bit on the thick side, and the ones that went over the suppressors are borderline ridiculous. They attached with a dovetail on the top of the receiver and of course the front takedown pin. But this attachment method proved to be not quite rigid enough for people using laser aiming modules, specifically for night vision. Sig has addressed this issue as well by adding 2 screws to the attachment method, and I also believe the new design adds rigidity. This new handguard feels way tougher than the older incarnations, and from what I've heard from people using it, it can mount laser aiming modules and they will hold zero with this handguard. Plus, it also has a much better feel to it than the older generations. Quick side note, many of you are very observant on Instagram, noticing that my 2 screws are missing, and they indeed are. What happened was when Illumin Arms sent out their full-size Spear for me to demo, they went through the whole gun and cleaned it thoroughly before I got it. I imagine they didn't quite tighten their handguard screws enough, or for whatever reason the handguard screws on their full-size Spear fell out, and since Illumin Arms helped me out by allowing me to borrow the gun, I took the screws out of my Spear Lt and put it in their gun before shipping it back. I'll source some new ones somehow before I start using lasers, but until then it is really fine without them. Apparently there are some reports out there that the Sig Spear Lt isn't very accurate and that it suffers from barrel flex, but that hasn't been my experience at all. This gun is a straight up shooter and been very consistent at various ranges.
Oh.
Let's deal with the so-called barrel flex first. If you haven't seen it, there's a video going around where a guy has a Sig Spear Lt and can move the barrel from side to side in the handguard and it stays fixed from one side to another. As you can see, my barrel will move just barely, but then it does go back to center every time. At 100 yards, we were easily able to shoot right at 1-inch groups or ever so slightly above that with the Callaway Ballistic 77 grain. For a service type rifle, this is more than acceptable and far more accurate than most service rifles. I would consider this a very accurate and capable 5.56, and at least in my experience, the reports of this gun having accuracy issues are greatly exaggerated. We even made some shots at 1,000 yards with the Sig Tango T 1-6, which is a phenomenal scope.
Oh, probably 2 targets low, a target left. Hit.
But maybe we should have had a little more magnification for that distance. But even with the 6 power, we were still able to get some good hits on with this rifle at 1,000 yards.
Okay, you were about a target and a half to the right.
The lower is now full ambi just like the full-size Spear. The lever on the side allows bolt release with a down stroke and bolt hold open by pushing up. I really like the way this is set up. Having the right side bolt hold open will allow the shooter to clear most malfunctions on the gun while maintaining strong hand grip for right-handers. The left-hand side of the gun does have a very nice oversized paddle for bolt release for the traditionalists and left-handed among us. Safety and mag release are also present on both sides. Sadly, the side charging handle from the full-size Spear is absent on the LT versions, but this is a very well-designed lower and greatly adds to the appeal of the gun. The trigger is also greatly improved over previous incarnations. Sig refers to this trigger as the flat blade match. The shape of it has a very good feel and is pulling crisp at 4 pounds with minimal take-up. This is by far the best stock trigger that I've ever felt in an MCX. According to Sig, the new Spear Lt can also take any AR-15 trigger now instead of the older generations that required an MCX specific trigger. So that is a nice improvement, and if you want to upgrade the trigger, that makes it a little easier. The upper receiver is pretty much the same from previous generations. Of note on the MCX design, the cam path is changeable, so should you shoot one enough to actually wear one out, you can replace it. The charging handle is good, maybe not quite as good as a Radian, but I haven't felt like it has required changing. The Spear Lt is piston driven as opposed to most AR-15s that are direct impingement. I could easily make a whole video debating the two operating systems, and we don't have time for all of that today, so I'm going to give you the bare basics. The piston system should allow this gun to run longer and cleaner than a direct impingement between cleanings. It also keeps temperatures lower in the operating system, potentially elongating the life of those components. I will say that this one is approaching 2,000 rounds and has never been cleaned. Runs suppressed 90% of the time. This gun is amazingly reliable. I've never had a single malfunction, and while I will probably clean it now at this point, I feel confident it could run another few thousand rounds and just keep right on ticking. The stock is a simple skeletonized stock with a small cheek guard. This really isn't much of a cheek riser, but it does keep your cheek off the bare metal. I love the stock and I like a fairly short length of pull, and I also like how compact it folds. Some of the shooters that shot the Spear Lt did complain about the length of pull a little and wanted something a bit longer. Good news is if you're not a fan of the stock, it is easily swappable because it is just attached with pick rail at the back of the lower receiver. The barrel is of course quick change, as pointed out earlier, has a taper to better align adapters for superior concentricity, and has Sig's new clutch 3-prong adapter on the end. As a silencer attachment method, I like the clutch. To break it down, it's kind of like a taper locking system similar to Q's Cherry Bomb, Reardon's system, or the Dead Air Xeno, but then it does have an additional mechanical locking mechanism as well, in addition to the taper lock. Sadly, I don't own any Sig cans, but CGS was kind enough to let me try out this prototype Helios clutch. It's basically just a Helios, probably the greatest all-round utility can made today, with clutch hardware in the back. It sounds amazing on the Spear LT. It would seem like it is gassed nearly perfectly with the Helios clutch attached and the Spear LT in the suppressor setting. I know people will ask, but I have no idea when or if CGS will make the Helios clutch available to the public. Since I mentioned the gas system, let's talk about it for a second. It's very simple, just 2 settings, basically suppressed and unsuppressed, labeled with a plus or minus on the handguard. It is very easy to make changes with these large windows cut into the handguard. I love that Sig has included a suppressor setting. I do kind of wish there were more settings, as different silencers have different amounts of back pressure, and more settings would allow you to more specifically tune the gun, but this is good and has been working great for me. Recoil is very light. Don't get me wrong, recoil is always light from a 5.56, but when you shoot a lot of them, you do notice subtle differences between different 5.56 guns. Of note, typically piston-driven guns have a touch more recoil than direct impingement systems, but this isn't the case with the Spear LT. The Spear LT is a very soft shooting gun, and it is very enjoyable to shoot. Recoil is very light and exceptionally light for a piston-driven system. I'm a huge fan of this current incarnation of the MCX. I believe it is truly the pinnacle of the MCX lineup and finally living up to all the greatness and hype that was promised with previous generations. I like the older MCX guns, but I always felt like something was missing and they weren't living up to the potential that the system had. I never really saw any of them as my go-to rifle or something I was really all that excited about shooting. The Spear LT I can definitely see as my go-to rifle, and I greatly enjoy shooting it. I feel that with the Spear LT, the MCX has finally lived up to all the greatness that the system was capable of, and this is the MCX as it should be. That said, is it perfect? Well, nothing is perfect. But other than the fact that I wish it was a little lighter on my wallet, I have a hard time trying to find anything to complain about. That being said, I do think it is worth the price of admission. The Spear LT is an exceptional rifle. Guys, thank you so much for watching, and thanks to American Hartford Gold for sponsoring today's video. I'd also like to thank Callaway Ballistics for providing me with all the 5.56 that we shot in the video, and I'd like to bring special attention to their 77 grain Match 223. This stuff is absolutely phenomenal, and if you want to see how good your 5.56 really is, put some of this in it and check out the accuracy and see how far you can shoot your 5.56. And guys, if you're not subscribed to the channel, go ahead and hit that subscribe button right now. As always, we have some really big reviews in the works that you won't want to miss. If you want to know what those reviews are way before they hit the YouTube channel, check us out on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, where you can see what's being reviewed in real time. Check out the link in the description for cool finds and special offers. And if you like what we do here on Alabama Arsenal and you want to help support the channel, the best possible way to do that is through Patreon. These videos can be surprisingly expensive to make, and every contribution helps and is greatly appreciated. There's also Alabama Arsenal gear right below the video if you want to go out and represent. And as always, guys, thank you so much for watching.